Rasta. Now, John Benjamin served as the High Commissioner of the UK to Ghana, and of course, some other countries. And whilst he was here, we all enjoyed having him around. In fact, he made utterances that shaped some corners of this country. He made very good friends, and I'm sure that he also made some friends that were not so very good. Today, we have John Benjamin on the line, all the way from his base in the United Kingdom, and he has agreed to talk to us. And he's joined us via Zoom.
Hello there, how are you?
Yes. I'm very much all right, John. How are you doing, John?
Very well, thank you. It's nice to talk to you again and all your listeners in Ghana. This is an unusual day because it's actually hotter in London than it is in Accra, and that doesn't happen very often.
Interesting. That is very true. And you're looking very, very good. What's the secret? What have you been eating? What have you been doing? Yes.
Well, I'm 63 now, so getting older. But my wife and I, we have a great diet, and I keep fit. I walk like 20,000 steps a day, and I play in an over 60s football team. So how about that? That keeps me fit.
What position do you play in the football team? Are you the goalkeeper?
No, I usually play in defense, but as it's a bunch of 60-year-olds, it doesn't matter. After 10 minutes, everybody is completely out of breath.
Interesting, John. Thank you again for accepting to talk to us. Now, John Benjamin, tell me, a lot of Ghanaians have missed you, and many feel that if you were here around this time, we'll be hearing you so much and seeing you so much on Twitter, now called X, making some interesting utterances. What was your stay in Ghana like for you?
Well, we look back very, very happily. So I was there from May 2014 to June 2017. So it's a long time ago now. It's in fact over a decade since we arrived in Ghana. Very happy memories. My wife and I had just been married for a short time before we went there. Our son was very young. He remembers it. And so I'd like to take him back to Ghana one day. He's got very happy memories. No, it was a happy time. And I've always remained emotionally tied to Ghana and very interested in seeing how Ghana is doing, and wishing it well, and taking part in the debate on X. Although some people take it far too seriously. I often say something as a joke, and the reaction is a little bit too exaggerated. But it's a wonderful country, and I just want always the very, very best for Ghana.
Interesting. Thank you so much. Now, did you choose to come to Ghana, or it came to you as a surprise?
Well, I chose it because in the foreign ministry, whenever there's a vacancy and it's advertised a long, long time in advance, then anyone who can apply. And then there's an internal mechanism of interviews and so on. And in my case, I'd heard great things about Ghana and a posting in Accra. And my ambition was always to have a posting on every continent, but I was missing the African continent. And Ghana was a great job. And it was also an internal promotion. I came from Chile. And the posting in Ghana was a bigger posting, a bigger embassy or high commission in this case, more staff, more people, more budget. And it was a very obvious choice. So I chose Ghana, but of course only as part of an application process.
Interesting. What about Ghana did you hear at the time that was interesting to you?
Well, people always said that first number of things. The Ghanaians are incredibly nice, pleasant, welcoming people. Firstly, secondly, Accra was a decent city to live in. The staff at the High Commission were good people to work with. And of course, importantly, there's a diaspora of, no one knows for sure, but probably at least 500,000 British people of Ghanaian origin. So, in other countries, really the only relationship is government to government, but it's much more interesting if additionally there's also a relationship between people through family connections. It makes it a much richer relationship than if it's just government to government dealings. And of course we have that between the UK and Ghana for obvious historic reasons. So it's that was attractive too, because it's a kind of relationship with a lot of aspects to it, not just boring government issues, but culture, sport, and families, people, friends. That makes it very attractive.
Wonderful. John Benjamin, Your Excellency. Yes,
No, don't call me that. Just call me John.
But part of your titles, Your Excellency, you want to push that away?
No, I think I always think titles are a bit too exaggerated. One of the things, I'll tell you a funny story. When I first came to Ghana, there's a tradition in Ghana and in quite a lot of other countries that we don't have here. So when you make a speech, you have to start for the first minute or two by naming everybody there who has a title. Your Excellency so-and-so, the Honourable so-and-so. And of course, I quickly learnt the get out, which is just to say all protocols observed. But in the UK, we don't have that tradition, even despite our reputation for being very bound to history. So if you make a speech here, you might mention the number one leading person in the room or the person who invited you, but you don't have to go through that long list of everyone who's present and naming them one by one with their titles. So it took me a long time to get used to that.
I appreciate that. Now, did you find the Ghanaian people as welcoming as you were told they would be?
Yeah, very much. And very kind of even keel. I think that's reflected in the fact that Ghana, compared to so many societies, is not, the incidence of violence, for example, is much lower than in many countries, and people are not. I mean, there's always a danger in generalizing, right? I'm generalizing here about 33 million people, or whatever the population is of Ghana today, 30 plus million. So you can't generalize, but nevertheless, Ghanaians are well known for being calm and pleasant and courteous and friendly. And of course, one thing you learn as a Westerner living in Africa is much more humility, because there are so many people who have so much less than what we grew up with, but are very giving and kind and sharing, and non-complaining. So that's a very attractive combination. So yeah, I thought Ghanaian people had a tremendous reputation for me as very friendly, and I always found that to be the case.
You are retired right now. Tell me, when you agreed that you wanted to be a diplomat, I'm sure that you had some goals, personal goals for yourself. Have you achieved all those, or you have more to achieve?
Yeah, well, in the career terms, yeah, I mean, it's a wonderful career because it sends you all over the world. You learn different languages, different cultures. You learn about different religions, different ways of doing things. And of course, I met my life partner and got married and had a child along the way, a bit later in life than many people. That happened to me when I was almost 50. But yeah, it was wonderful. And if you travel around the world, you just realize that on the one hand, there's just one humanity. But on the other hand, there are, of course, enormous cultural, political, religious, other socioeconomic differences. And if you're able to to work between those differences, that's a tremendous thing. But you know, a 40-year career is a long time. It's half a lifetime, and eventually it's time to do something else. It's time to let younger generations take over.
Interesting. Now that you are retired, what do you do? What are you doing? Are you just resting? And
No. I think there's a very old conception of retirement, certainly in the UK, of someone just sitting in their rocking chair, you know, watching the TV all day. But no, I've got a number of new roles. So I run an organization called Free Speech Union International, which is working to prevent censorship, and especially in countries like the UK, where free speech is being rolled back a little bit. So I do that. I'm an advisor to a tech kind of multi-millionaire guy here. I'm his international advisor, and he's also trying to get his company into various new markets. So I'm helping with that. I'm on the advisory board of a project called Fix Britain, which is looking at some of the problems that the UK has and what we can do about it. And I'm doing various other things as well. But obviously, I don't have the same structure in my life that I had before, and I have a lot more free time, which is very nice.
Yes, certainly. I mean, you were also ambassador to Burkina Faso and Togo, am I correct?
Yes, and Benin as well. And I'm following very closely what's going on in Togo next door to you, because there are signs of unrest and protest against, the guy and his father, the Nassingbeys, have been in charge for nearly 60 years, which is not healthy.
No.
And there are increasing protests there, which I'm no doubt you in Accra are following.
What do you want to see happen in Togo? I mean, in the midst of all the confusion that's happening right now, what do you want to see happen there?
Well, I don't want to dictate what should happen. Obviously, it's got to be up to the people of Togo, but they can only express that in really free elections and in having a genuine choice. And what's happened is Nassingbe has constantly changed the constitution in order basically to keep himself in power. Something, unfortunately, we see in too many parts of Africa, whether it's Equatorial Guinea, or we saw it in Gambia. You remember during my time in Ghana, we see it in many countries. But Nassingbe and his father, who took power in a coup, have been there since the 1960s. I mean, this is ridiculous. You can't have a one family dynastic rule.
Yeah.
And of course, what happens when you have no checks and balances?
Right.
No proper opposition, no free journalism, and lots of repression of people, is you just get more and more corruption. And Togo is a very poor country, as you know. I'm sure you've been.
Right.
I used to go regularly, and when you cross the border in Aflao, you feel it immediately that Togo is way behind Ghana, with less freedom and less and more poverty, and the people of Togo deserve better.
Yes, you are very, very right. So there is a demonstration happening right there in Togo as we speak right now, and it's all over in the news. John Benjamin was also, in fact, the High Commissioner of the UK to Togo, in fact. And of course, Burkina Faso.
Yeah.
I mean, whilst you were here, Alassane Ouattara was in La Côte d'Ivoire. I'm sure you might have spoken with him, because I know that you speak French. And also, over there in Burkina Faso, there was Ibrahim Traoré. But Ibrahim Traoré was not the president. Now he is the leader of the people of Burkina Faso. What does that say to you?
I understand that in Burkina Faso, I mean, that was the poorest country I saw. And I understand the frustrations of the people very much. Wonderful people. I think Burkina Faso is a mixture of two of the local languages, and it means kind of like the upright man or the upstanding person.
Correct.
I think, so I understand some of the sentiment behind Traore. The only problem is that, what we should all aspire to is representative government with proper checks and balances, with legitimate politics on all sides and frequent elections and occasional changes of power, like you've managed in Ghana several times. And to me, regardless of the politics, it never sits comfortably to see a person in uniform running a country.
Right.
The military should be subservient to the civilian government and not the other way around. However, I do understand the huge dissatisfaction. Of course, Traore, when he was, I forget how long he was president of Burkina, but it was many decades, again, without the possibility of removing him from power. And there are, of course, some great examples in Africa, apart from Ghana, that people can follow, particularly Botswana and Namibia, where they have free elections and peaceful changes of power, and the military are completely subservient to civil political power. So it's possible. Of course, you've got just amongst your neighbors there in Ghana, you've got many different examples of different ways of doing things. But I do believe that an open society, a free society, is the best model.
Ibrahim Traore seems to have a lot of support from across the world. What is your relationship with him in terms of the UK and Burkina Faso?
Well, he's taken his distance, as you know, not just from the West in general and from France in particular, which was the colonial power before independence. But also, he's left ECOWAS, right, together with the leaders of Mali and Niger. So he's taken his distance from Ghana and other West African countries in that sense. I understand the popularity. And of course, in Thomas Sankara, they have a kind of historical role model.
Right.
But the problem is that someone like that, they always say that they're going to hand the country back through democratic elections. And then often, sadly, across the years, they never do that. And they just turn into another African strongman. And of course, you can start with a huge wave of popularity and then never let go of power, and you end up very unpopular.
Interesting. Now, we see a lot of coup d'etats around Africa every now and then. Do you think that a time will come when there will be a coup d'etat in the UK?
No, because the institutions are so well established and the military are so non-political and so clearly subservient to civil rule, which means in practice the Prime Minister, the Minister of Defence. So there's a very short answer to that question, which is no.
How can we avoid coup d'etats in Africa? Do you have an idea?
Well, it depends what you're talking about. I mean, I don't think there's any chance of a coup d'etat in Ghana now, because the Ghanaian people, after so many decades now of democracy and of seeing that they can change their rulers through the ballot box, which has happened, every 8 years, more or less, in Ghana. I don't think the people of Ghana would accept now a military person just coming in and taking over. Of course, it does depend on other things. I mean, for as long, this is more likely if something happens like an economic collapse, right? And there's desperation and complete alienation of the people from their political leaders. But I mentioned Namibia, I mentioned Botswana. In those countries and others, it's also inconceivable in Africa that there could be a military coup. So there's no reason to say it's a natural outcome. It depends on the circumstances, and the more you embed democracy, the less possible it becomes.
True. Now, we see a lot of African countries also borrowing from countries like the UK, where you are right now, the United States and all that. I haven't heard of the UK borrowing money from any country in so long. Do you
Well,
think...
that's not quite true. You need to unpack that. So, first of all, you have to ask who they're borrowing from. Are they borrowing from private banks? And if these are loans from the banking sector, that's not a governmental thing. That's not the government of Britain telling HSBC they must loan X million to Ghana. That's an arrangement between Ghana and that bank. That's the first thing. Secondly, the British government buys government bonds. It has US government bonds, Japanese government bonds, Euro bonds. So and it sells bonds, which it has to pay back, which is just a different form of indebtedness. So it's a much more complex issue. But I note there was a slogan under the last government in Ghana of Ghana beyond aid, and of course the way to achieve being beyond aid is to improve the economy. And if you don't improve the economy, you can't break out of that cycle.
Now we have a new leader in Ghana, John Dramani Mahama. I'm sure you interacted with him whilst you were here. Do you think that, looking at things like dollar rate going down as compared to the Ghana cedi and some other such things are something we should start to be happy about?
Well, on the currency, of course, if your currency is weaker, it's not all bad news because it means your exports are cheaper, right? So it's a question of taking advantage of that. I interacted with John Mahama, and a lot of people criticized me for whatever criticisms I made, but I would have made the same criticisms of Akufo-Addo's government. It's just I was there during the Mahama government. Had I been there during the Akufo-Addo government, which I think was a huge disappointment to a lot of people, particularly the latter years, which is why the MPP presumably lost so badly in the last election. My interest is I want to see the people of Ghana flourish. And as you know, I made a major issue of corruption. And although corruption is, of course, a moral issue, it's also, if you want to take the emotion out of it, it's also an economic issue, because corruption is a really bad way of running a country and of allocating resources, right? If people are stealing some of those resources, they're not going to the purposes for which they were meant. And I think it is a problem in Ghana. Obviously, it's worse in some other countries. But the point about, I got on very well with John Mahama on a one-to-one basis. We had many long conversations. I think he means well. I presume, you tell me, but unless there's a change of the constitution, he only has this one term, right? Before he has to step down. 4 years is not very long in politics. I get the sense, and I'm just observing this from a long way away, that he's very determined to make these 4 years really count. And I wish him well with that. But corruption is, we all know it, is sadly a real problem in Ghana. And certainly in my time, no one serious was prosecuted for corruption. Corruption is a nice word. It's a long word. There's another word for it, which is shorter, which is theft. Corruption is theft, right? It's people in public positions abusing that position to enrich themselves while removing that money from the people who are supposed to benefit. And therefore, quite apart from the ethical, moral issue, it means that a few people are making themselves rich, but it definitely making millions of other Ghanaians poorer, because schools don't get built, roads don't get built, or they don't get built properly if the contract goes to somebody's cousin who's not capable of building the road, for example. And so everybody suffers, and corruption is a difficult issue. And if you are going to prosecute people, it's no good only prosecuting people from your political opposition. You must make a statement by also prosecuting people from your own political party who've indulged in those behaviors,
right,
to make it clear that it's unacceptable. And I do hope that something serious happens in these next 4 years, because that is to the cost of all the Ghanaian people.
That is very true. John Benjamin is my guest from his base in the UK. He was the High Commissioner of the UK to Ghana, and we're having a really interesting conversation. The whole Ghana is listening to you right now. Now, what are your thoughts on the Iran-Israel war?
Oh, look, that's a very big subject to cover in a very few minutes. I think that what I want to see is peace in the Middle East, and I want to see a two-state solution, a Palestinian independent state in the West Bank and Gaza Strip, also a secure Israel, and an Israel at peace with its Arab neighbors. So you have a problem of Israeli government behavior, and you have the problem of those governments in the region which basically want to wipe Israel off the map. And Iran is one of those countries whose leadership says, death to Israel and death to America, death to Britain too, they say charmingly. You can negotiate with anybody except somebody who says they want to kill you. Because if somebody says they want to kill you, well, you can't reach a halfway point where you agree that they half kill you. And when you get to that point, I'm afraid people come to blows. I hope what we're seeing, because it's very distressing, will lead to a long-term peace. But I have to say that in Iran, the theocratic mullah-led government it has is not a reflection of the popular will. There have been no free elections between legitimate opposition parties since the fall of the Shah there, even before. But you can't say that the Ayatollah Khamenei is a popularly elected leader who reflects the will of the people. Last year, Iran carried out capital punishment more than any country on the planet. Nearly 1,000 people hanged, some in public. This is not a very nice regime, and we shouldn't pretend it is. And so the Iranian people are wonderful people. The Iranian/Persian civilization is one of the oldest continuous civilizations on earth. Incredibly rich culture, history, language, literature, art, and potentially a great country. So I have the same hope for it, that eventually it can be a free and open society in which power changes hands through elections with no violence.
Well, they are talking about the fact that they are not interested in any regime change. It's all about weapons and weapons and weapons and weapons.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I think that's understandable. I mean, you have an American president in Trump who says, I think genuinely, and I understand this, that he didn't like the US interventions in Afghanistan and Iraq. They cost billions, if not trillions of dollars, great loss of life. He doesn't want to go around the world as the world's policeman, changing governments or dictating to other countries what government they should have. So in that sense, regime change is not his prime objective. The trouble is, when you have a very repressive society, whether it's Iran or, sadly, increasingly Togo, right next door to Ghana, and there's no mechanism for changing your government peacefully, openly, regularly. You in Ghana, every single 4 years, you have the opportunity to either keep your government if you think they're doing okay, or change it. We have that here in the UK every 5 years. Don't forget, the people of Iran are never, ever, ever asked that question.
Interesting. Well, it looks like we're supposed to be doing this for 30 minutes. It's almost 30 minutes right now. I don't want to take too much of your time. But if you
I have another 10 minutes if you still want to ask me.
Oh, yes. I have more questions to ask you. John Benjamin, thank you so much.
Let's do a round of quick questions and answers.
All right.
And we must talk about music for the last 2 minutes.
For real. We'll do that. Now, if you had the opportunity to choose one more country where you would be High Commissioner of, which one would it be?
Well, the one I never got to is Sweden here in Europe, because I grew up partly in Sweden. I speak Swedish. It would have been nice to go back there. I've just come back yesterday from a trip for a few days to Poland, which is very interesting. Poland's a great example of how a country can change very positively. When I was a kid, it was a communist country in Eastern Europe under Soviet effective control, and I went there then. It was grey, monotone, nothing in the shops, very repressive, military police everywhere. And now it's a wonderful, free, open, prosperous country, one of the most successful countries in Europe, certainly in recent years. So that would be kind of interesting. No, I'm done. I mean, if I had to go back to other countries, it would be much more as a visitor, as a tourist. And of course, I have a second home anyway, which is Chile in South America, because that's where my wife is from. So maybe a few years down the track, after living back here, we'll go and live there instead.
Interesting. And I remember how the BBC reported your, exit from this country. Very beautiful and very nice. Now, let me ask you
Well, you were a big star at the exit of me from Ghana, because you and the lovely Wiyala, who's a great friend of mine, who I saw here in London a few weeks ago, you both performed at my farewell party, which I will never, ever forget. Thank you for doing that.
Yes. Interesting. Now, you came to Ghana. In fact, you decided to come to Ghana because of the peace, because of the welcoming nature of the people. I'm not sure it's the same thing with Mexico. Mexico is a country that is noted for a lot of violence. Were you scared, or did you feel something when you were going to Mexico?
Yeah, I mean, Mexicans are wonderful people as well, and amazing culture. I mean, the culture before the Spanish came, they were colonized by Spain, goes back thousands of years. There's amazing kind of archaeological remains that go back that time. Obviously, the murder rate in Mexico is no secret. There's a big problem with drugs, mainly to the US. And as you know from following what's happened in the US, migration is a huge issue. So you have people from Mexico, but from all over Latin America and further afield, moving through there, a mass of humanity trying to get to the United States. So it's complicated. Hopefully many Ghanaians will get the chance to see it next year during the World Cup.
Right.
Which I hope the Black Stars are going to qualify for again. We missed you the last couple of times.
That's our prayer. Now, John, please tell me now. In your work as the High Commissioner of all these countries, tell me the biggest challenge you ever had.
Well, I think actually one of the biggest challenges, this seems like a distant memory now, was when I was newly in Ghana. And do you remember in 2014 the Ebola crisis broke out? And in the end, it's easy to know now, in the benefit of hindsight, it was limited to Sierra Leone, Guinea, and Liberia. But you'll remember the fear that we all had that it was coming to Ghana. So one of the biggest challenges was how to respond to that. And working with President Mahama, Kofi Annan, the late great Kofi Annan, whose passing I mourned very deeply, there was an agreement to use Accra Airport, you'll remember, as kind of the base of operations for the UN. And I think that was a huge challenge and an incredible achievement, because imagine what it would have been like in Ghana or Cote d'Ivoire or Senegal to the west. Imagine if Ebola had spread like it did in those countries. It would have been a terrible outcome.
Right.
So that was an enormous challenge, but it was, in retrospect, it was very satisfactory, because if you think what was prevented that could have happened, it's very satisfying to have been involved in something like that.
We, the creatives in Ghana, would always remember you, and I know many more people will remember you for your kindness to us and how you drew us closer to the seat of diplomacy, you know, inviting all of us to come around you and all that make us feel really important, you know. Tell me, what has been your biggest achievement as a high commissioner in any of these countries?
Well, I think that's an important point. I don't want to be immodest and point to big achievements. I think my attitude was always that diplomats, ambassadors, historically were always regarded as these very distant, elite, unapproachable figures, right? That's the kind of reputation they had. And I think it's really important to demystify it and to explain what we do, but also be available to people. And to celebrate the culture, the music, the football, whatever it is, because that's what real people do with their lives, right? It's what they like, it's what they enjoy, the food, the culture, and so on and so forth. So I'm quite proud that some people liked it, some people didn't. Of course, I recognize that, but I'm quite proud of being able to get close to the cultures of the countries I was in. And to celebrate people like yourselves, the artists, the footballers, the people who make a country and a culture fun to live in and to be part of. So I think it's very important that people in diplomacy try and make it a bit more real and a bit less remote and elitist. And that's what I try to do.
Interesting. John Benjamin is my guest, and we are having a beautiful conversation. We are in the dying embers of this conversation. Now, John, if there was going to be a statue of yours to be built by any of these countries that you've served in, or one statue that will be built by an individual somewhere, and he wants you to choose a country in which this statue should be put, one of the countries that you have served in, which one would it be?
No, I don't believe in that. I think we know what we're referring to here.
Right. Whoa. It looks like we are freezing, right? We just are freeze. Okay, so John Benjamin, my guest, and we're having a really good conversation, and a dicey question just came in there, and you know, I knew where he was going with his answer, you know? Yeah, just a freeze. I don't know. Okay, so he joined us all the way from his base right there in the UK. He is a high commissioner that a lot of Ghanaians loved. He drew a lot of people to the seat of diplomacy. In fact, so, you know, we really had a good time. Very, very wonderful time. My brother, my sister, John Benjamin. We're looking forward to having him back in a few seconds. And we will be speaking music when he returns, yes? We'll be talking about music, and we'll also be talking about sports when we return. But remember, we have this interesting news for farmers. Are you a cocoa farmer or a vegetable farmer? Maybe you are a peanut farmer. And what kind of peanuts do you prefer cultivating? Now, let me deal with the cocoa farmers first. Now, cocoa has a lot of pests, including akate, ate, cocoa ntuntum, and much more. And these destroy cocoa farms. Now, I have good news for you. Adama, West Africa is here with Trevor, Aseta Star, and Emma Star. And these ones will control all the pests on your cocoa farm. But remember not to use all of them at once. Use one at a time. Now you can use Trevor, and after a month, you can now use Aseta Star, but don't combine all these at a time. And all the Akate, Ate, and Koko Ntuntum will be dealt with. Go get Trevor, Aseta Star, and Emma Star for good news on your cocoa farm. Oh gosh. Now, if you have weeds and grasses growing in your granite or cowpea or soya bean farm, no problem. We also have the weed block and vezir. Now, don't use the two of them combined. One at a time, either weed block or vezir, to deal with the grasses and the weeds on the farm. Now, the good news is this: all the young grasses, the old grasses, and those yet to even come out would all be destroyed on your cowpea, granite, and soya bean farm. Please go get that. Now, Adama West Africa is also happy to announce to you that those of you who are vegetable farmers, there is good news for you. Use Agil, A-G-I-L. And Agil is what is going to deal with all the grasses on your vegetable farms. Carrot farm, lettuce farm, tomato farm, pepper farm, or even okra farm. No problem at all. All the young grasses, old grasses and weeds, and those that are about to come up would all be destroyed with Agil. Remember to go get that, and remember to use personal protection materials when handling agrochemicals like Agil, Weed Block, Vezir, Trevor, Aseta Star, and Emma Star. No problem at all. You must use personal protection materials and read the product labels before usage. Adama West Africa products are available in all agrochemical shops near you. Please call Adama West Africa on 0544325030. 0544325030 or 0270 575030 or 030 2787682 030 2787687. Adama West Africa. No Adama, no Kria. And my name is certainly Blakk Rasta. We're trying to get John Benjamin on the line again so that we will complete our beautiful interview. It doesn't look like we are going to be able to get John Benjamin. In fact, he was running extra time. He was getting into another meeting. But I want to believe that we have had a very beautiful conversation. Thanks so much to John Benjamin for talking to us. We appreciate you and we love you. This is the Urban Blend, and of course the African History class, and we pick the mind of John Benjamin on so many different things.